What would be your reaction if on your first day of work you find your boss dancing in his
I didn't hear you
office?
come
Are you
in.
going to laugh or are you going to keep a calm face?
That was the question Zara Mensah had exactly 4 seconds to answer before her entire career flashed before her eyes. But we'll get to that. First, you need to understand something about Shin Jae-won, CEO of JW Capital Group, the kind of South Korean conglomerate whose reach went so far into the country's economy that half the things you touched in a given day had, somewhere in their supply chain, a decision he had made. A man whose net worth had enough zeros at the end to make accountants physically lightheaded. A man whose face had appeared on the cover of Forbes Asia for years running, and who, if you asked anyone in that building, had never once, not in the memory of a single employee, smiled. If you are watching the video, comment your country. Not during the earnings call where their competitors reportedly had to excuse themselves from a conference room to compose themselves. Not at the industry gala where he wrote a check large enough to fund an entire wing of a children's hospital and accepted the applause like he was waiting for a bus. Not even the time his driver had taken a wrong turn on the way to a shareholder meeting and ended up in the middle of a K-pop fan event, and the car had been briefly surrounded by teenagers with light sticks. Nothing. Not a flicker. Shin Jae-won simply existed at an altitude most people couldn't access. Joy was a language he did not speak. Warmth was a currency he did not trade. He was precise, formidable, and as far as anyone in JW Capital Group could verify, not entirely human in the ways that counted, which made what Zara Mensah witnessed on a random Wednesday at 7:48 in the morning, 39 floors above the city of Seoul, in a private executive lounge that was absolutely supposed to be locked, the single most earth-shattering piece of accidental intelligence she had ever stumbled into. She had been at JW Capital Group for exactly 7 weeks. 7 weeks of recalibrating everything she thought she knew about pace, about pressure, about what it meant to work somewhere that treated excellence not as a goal, but as the floor you stood on before you started climbing. 7 weeks of Seoul seeping into her bloodstream, the city doing what it always did, sneaking up on you with its beauty between the noise and the efficiency and the 10,000-person foot traffic on a Tuesday afternoon. 7 weeks of learning that her commute from her apartment in Mapo took her past a palace every single morning, and that she stopped being surprised by it around week 3, which felt like its own kind of miracle. She had come to Seoul from Atlanta, not chasing anything, not running from anything, just following the specific gravitational pull of an opportunity that had announced itself so clearly she would have been foolish to ignore it. She had a master's in international business strategy from Georgetown, a portfolio of work that had made her previous employer's board sit up straighter, and the kind of instincts that couldn't be taught, only inherited or earned. She had earned hers. The JW Capital hiring panel had gone quiet when they reviewed her application, the particular quiet of people recalibrating upward, and one of them had said carefully, "How soon could you start?" She had said, "Give me 2 weeks to find an apartment." They had given her 3 and paid for the relocation. The reputation she'd built in 7 weeks in the Global Partnerships division was the kind that arrived before she did. She had a way of seeing through the surface of a proposal to the structural thing underneath, the real value, or the real problem, that left senior colleagues slightly unsettled and junior colleagues aggressively taking notes. She also had a way of presenting herself that had become, quietly, its own form of office legend. Her first day, tailored wide-leg trousers in a deep burgundy, a crisp ivory blouse tucked in with intention, a blazer in forest green with tortoiseshell buttons that had no business working as well as it did, and low white sneakers that said "I understand the assignment. And I am also comfortable." Her hair, thick natural locks, was pulled into a high puff that was somehow both effortless and architectural. Her earrings were large gold hoops. Her presence was the kind that arrived before she did. Her desk neighbor, a woman named Soo-yun, had stared at her for a full 6 seconds before saying, "You're going to be a lot, aren't you?" Zara had said, "Probably, but the good kind of a lot." She had been right on both counts. The executive lounge on the 39th floor was technically restricted to senior leadership, but the espresso machine up there was a Slayer single group that had been imported from Seattle and maintained by a technician who came in once a month like a specialist visiting a very important patient. Zara had discovered, through the kind of investigative persistence she genuinely wished she could list on her performance review, that the lounge sat completely empty every morning between 7:30 and 8:20 because executives didn't filter in until 8:45, and the cleaning staff finished their rounds by 7:15. A 25-minute window, minimum, of guaranteed solitude and the best espresso in the building. She was not a woman who left windows unopened. The first few times she had slipped up, made her coffee, stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass, and looked out at Seoul below, enormous and moving, and felt something clarify. In her chest. Something that said, yes, this is right. This is where you are supposed to be. She would drink her espresso, watch the city do what cities do in the early morning, all that life already in motion, and then she would take the stairs back down to 34 and appear at her desk like she'd simply been on an extended bathroom break. Nobody had ever been there when she arrived. Until Wednesday. She heard it before she opened the door. Music. Not the ambient corporate soundtrack the building usually pumped through its systems, that careful, inoffensive sonic wallpaper, designed to make no impression whatsoever. This was actual music. A track she clocked in under 3 seconds as a remix of something with roots, something with a bass line that bypassed your brain entirely and went straight to your body. Something with history in it. Something that moved. Zara paused outside the door with her hand on the handle. The music was definitely coming from inside the lounge. The lounge that was supposed to be empty for another 52 minutes. She was a smart woman. She had a master's degree from a very good university. She understood the concept of strategic retreat. She opened the door anyway. What she saw on the other side of that door rearranged her understanding of reality in a way that would take several months to fully settle. Shin Jae-won, the man whose boardroom presence had reportedly reduced grown men to nodding compulsively at whatever he said simply to end the experience of his attention, was dancing. Not a subtle sway. Not the careful head bob of someone acknowledging a beat while maintaining plausible deniability. Not anything that could be described as mere movement. He was dancing, completely, committedly, with full-body investment, in the center of the executive lounge in his shirt sleeves. His jacket was folded over the back of a chair with the precision of someone who had strong opinions about fabric. And the man had technique. Real technique. The kind that doesn't happen without years of practice. The kind that lives in the body at a cellular level. The kind that requires you to have, at some point, genuinely given yourself over to something. He was running a footwork sequence. Sharp, rhythmic, devastating in its precision. His feet were doing something that looked like a separate conversation from the rest of his body, complex and deliberate, and then he transitioned into something smoother, a wave that rolled through his torso, and Zara's brain performed an emergency shutdown because nothing, not a single piece of the 7 weeks she had spent in this building, had equipped her for this variable. He hadn't heard the door. He turned. He saw her. The music kept playing. Neither of them moved. Shin Jae-won's face ran through what Zara would later estimate as 8 distinct expressions in approximately 5 seconds. Shock. Controlled shock. Failed control. The attempt at neutral. The failure of the attempt. A second attempt. Marginal. Improvement. Something that looked, briefly, like genuine mortification. And then, the thing that finally landed. The face she knew from board decks and hallway encounters. Cold. Still. Offering nothing. He reached over and turned the music off. The silence was enormous. And Zara's body was doing something she found professionally inconvenient. It was shaking with suppressed laughter. The kind of laughter that had gotten pressurized somewhere in the vicinity of her diaphragm and was now fighting its way out with the force of something that had been sealed too long. Her jaw was clenched. Her eyes were watering. She was losing. Ms. Mensah. His voice was exactly what it always was in meetings. Low, measured, carrying the weight of a man who had never once in his life needed to raise it to be heard. He said her name the way he said everything, like it had been considered first. This floor is restricted. The laughter one. It came out of her in a full wave, genuine and uncontained, the kind that involved her whole body and required her to grab the door frame for structural support. She doubled over. She straightened. She looked at him, standing there in his perfect posture with his absolute refusal to acknowledge that anything remarkable had just occurred, and she lost it all over again. "I am so sorry," she managed, which was not entirely true, and they both understood that. "This floor," he said again, with the patience of a man who had decided to treat this situation as a logistical problem rather than a personal catastrophe, "is restricted to executive staff. Mr. Shin." She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were streaming. She was a professional. She had credentials. Mr. Shin, with the utmost respect, she made a small, helpless gesture toward the center of the room, the invisible stage where he had, seconds ago, been executing a footwork sequence that would have stopped traffic on any street in Atlanta. His jaw tightened. "You will not speak of this. I absolutely will not speak of this." She nodded, getting herself together with visible effort, smoothed the front of her blazer. Today she was in wide-leg olive trousers with a precise crease, a fitted cream-ribbed turtleneck, a long caramel-colored coat blazer hybrid that stopped at mid-thigh, and tan ankle boots with a small heel. Gold stud, earrings, a thin chain at her throat, and the composed expression of a woman who had not just witnessed her company's most feared executive doing something that would live rent-free in her mind indefinitely. "Mr. Shin," she said with full professional sincerity, "I want you to know that I say this with complete honesty and zero intention to flatter. Your footwork is better than 60% of the people I grew up watching in Atlanta, and we do not give that assessment lightly." Silence. "That is not a consolation statement," she added. "That is a factual observation. You've been hiding something genuinely remarkable from the world, and I think on behalf of the world that's quite unfair." He looked at her. She looked back. "You broke into the executive lounge," he said. "I borrowed the espresso machine. The Slayer down on 34 has been limping along on a bad grinder for 2 months, and I filed a maintenance request that has gone unanswered. This was a resource allocation decision. You've been doing this before." It was not a question. She didn't treat it as one. 7 weeks. Every morning, 7:45. I'm in and out in under 20 minutes. I clean up after myself completely, and I have never once encountered another human being up here. She tilted her head. Until today. Which, incidentally, is because your 8 o'clock was moved to 7:30, which is a scheduling issue, not a trespassing issue. It is a trespassing situation. It is a scheduling failure that I am prepared to take with me to my grave. She held his gaze steadily. On one condition. Something shifted in his eyes. Not anger. Something more careful than anger. "You have a condition," he repeated, with the exact tone of a man cataloging an unprecedented event. "The espresso machine. I want formal standing access, 7:30 to 8:15, every weekday morning. I will be invisible. I will leave the space exactly as I find it. No one will ever know I was here." She paused. "And what I saw today," she made a small, deliberate motion across her lips, "does not exist." The silence stretched long enough for 2 cars to honk at each other 39 floors below. "You are negotiating with me," he said slowly. "In my building. On a floor you accessed without authorization. I prefer the term informally accessed. Ms. Mensah." "Mr. Shin." A pause that had actual mass. 7:30 to 8:15, he said finally. Not a minute passed. She smiled at him. The real one. The one that started in her eyes and moved outward and didn't ask permission from anyone. "Pleasure doing business with you." She walked to the Slayer espresso machine, because she had not come 39 floors for nothing, and began making her coffee with the relaxed efficiency of a woman who had done this 87 times already. He watched her for a moment with the specific expression of someone encountering a variable their model had failed to account for. Then, with the composure of a man who had decided the universe owed him nothing by way of explanation, he picked his jacket off the chair, shook it out with one clean motion, and sat down at the lounge table with his phone. She took her espresso to the window. Seoul glittered below, indifferent and enormous. She didn't look at him. He didn't look at her. It was the best silence she had experienced in 7 weeks. By Thursday afternoon, the office knew that Zara Mensah had spoken to the CEO. Actually spoken to him. Actual words, in sequence, forming full sentences. The information had traveled at a speed that said something about how starved the building was for new information about the man. Soo-yeon cornered her at lunch with the energy of someone who had been waiting for this conversation since Tuesday. "He talked to you? Voluntarily? Like he initiated?" "He initiated, yes. It was brief. It was about building access protocols." "Building access." Soo-yeon set down her chopsticks. "Zara, it was very professional. People have been in this company for 5 years, and he has not voluntarily spoken to them. Not once. Not in 5 years." Soo-yeon leaned forward. "He doesn't do small talk. He doesn't do medium talk. He barely does necessary talk. Maybe I caught him at a good moment. There are no good moments with Shin Jae-won. There are tolerable moments, and there are the other kind. Soo-yeon studied her. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that would be appropriate to share with a colleague. That means something happened. It means nothing happened that I'm able to discuss. Zara picked up her own chopsticks. I have good energy, Soo-yeon. Some people are just receptive to that. What she did not say, what she would not say to any living person, was that the next morning at 7:32, she had arrived at the executive lounge to find the Slayer already running, warmed up and ready, and a clean ceramic cup set out on the counter. Beside it, she had stood there for a moment, looking at the cup. Then she had made her espresso, taken it to the window, and at 7:53 the door had opened and Shin Jae-won had walked in, set his phone on the table, and sat down with the manner of a man fulfilling a scheduled obligation. They had not spoken. They had not needed to. She had looked out at the city. He had reviewed whatever required the CEO's attention at 7:53 in the morning. The machine had hissed. The city had moved below. Them, enormous and continuous. And between them, in that warm, high silence, with Seoul laid out below like something that had been arranged specifically for this moment, something had begun. Quiet. Unannounced. No ceremony whatsoever. The way the things that actually matter tend to begin. The incident in the hallway happened on a Friday that had been going well up until that point. Zara had just come out of a meeting with the head of global partnerships, a meeting that had gone beyond well into the territory where you walk out knowing that. The ceiling of what people expect from you has been raised, and you are the one who raised it. She was moving with that particular energy, the good kind, the kind that feels like momentum, when she came around a corner and nearly walked directly into Shin Jae-won. He was with a group of senior executives, all of them wearing the specific energy of men who had been in a tense conversation and were actively performing that they hadn't been. Ms. Mensah, he said, a simple acknowledgement. Mr. Shin. She stepped to the side to let them pass. Professional, easy, unremarkable. But one of the men in the group, she recognized him from the organizational chart as Director Kwon, a person known primarily for his enthusiastic maintenance of whatever mood the CEO was currently in, gave her a look. The specific look that meant, what are you doing in this corridor? You are several floors above your station. Global Partnerships is on 34, he said pleasantly. The pleasantness was entirely ornamental. It is, Zara agreed, with equal pleasantness, equally ornamental. My meeting just wrapped. I'm heading back now. See that you do. He smiled. It didn't reach anything above his chin. Mr. Shin maintains a very structured environment. It's important that people understand expectations. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Shin Jae-won. Is this a formal directive, Mr. Shin? I want to make sure I'm responding to the appropriate authority. She kept her voice completely even. Because if it's coming from you, I'll absolutely take the note. But if it's coming from, she gave Director Kwon a look so politely unbothered it functioned as its own form of devastation. Anyone else, I'll simply assume I misheard. The other executives in the group went very still. Director Kwon opened his mouth. I believe we're running behind, Shin Jae-won said, without looking at Kwon. He walked. The group followed. Kwon followed, with a face that had done something complicated in the past 10 seconds. Zara exhaled, adjusted her blazer, went back to 34. Monday morning, 7:40. The lounge. He was already there. He looked up when she walked in. She went to the machine, started her process, and after a moment heard from the table behind her. You handled Friday well. He was rude, she said simply. I don't really respond to rude. Most people in this building do. He's considered an extension of my authority. Most people in this building are afraid of you. She glanced over her shoulder at him. I'm not afraid of you, so the math is different. A pause. Why not? She turned back to the machine, and the smile she gave the Slayer was private and warm. Because I've seen your footwork, Mr. Shin. It's very difficult to be afraid of someone after that. The sound he made quiet, involuntary, something that in a different man in a different context would have been the very beginning of a laugh. She filed it away like something that needed to be kept safe. It was the first one. She was already looking forward to the rest. The morning that changed everything, in the quiet, cumulative way that some things change everything, was in week 9. He had arrived before her, which had become common enough that she had stopped noting it as unusual. She made her espresso. She sat across from him, which had also become a thing that happened now, the two of them at the same table instead of the window and table configuration, though she couldn't have said when that transition occurred. He asked her about Atlanta. Not the way people usually asked, the polite conversational placeholder of it, the "oh nice, is it warm there" of it. He asked with actual specificity, like someone who had thought about the question before asking it. She told him about it honestly. The particular light on Peachtree Street in autumn. The way the city felt like it was always in the middle of becoming something. Not quite arrived, but absolutely on its way. The food, the music embedded in the everyday, the directness of people who didn't have the patience for anything other than the real thing. "You miss it," he said. "Every day," she said. "But I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, so." "How do you know?" She looked out at Seoul below, already busy at 8 in the morning, already running on its own enormous logic. "Because I haven't wanted to leave yet." He said nothing. But she felt the weight of that silence, the texture of it, the way it had changed in the weeks since she had accidentally walked into the most dangerous piece of information she'd ever held. It felt like a room being furnished slowly, not with fanfare, just piece by piece, until one day you look up and realize the space has become something you recognize. Something that feels, quietly and without your full permission, like it belongs to you. There's a specific kind of person who makes you laugh when they weren't supposed to. Not the court jester kind. Not the kind that performs for the laugh. The kind that says something so honest and so precisely true that the laugh comes out of you before you've had a chance to authorize it. The kind of laugh that embarrasses you a little, because it reveals something. Shin Jae-won had not laughed like that in a very long time. Zara Mensah made him do it in week 9, in the middle of a cross-departmental presentation that his presence alone had elevated to a blood pressure event for everyone in the room. The Global Partnerships Division had been asked to present their third quarter projections to a multi-department audience. The CEO attended. He sat at the head of the conference table like something that had been positioned there architecturally. Dark, charcoal suit, no expression, the kind of stillness that made the air in the room feel different. His chief of staff, Park Dong-hyun, sat 2 seats down with the practiced calm of a man who had learned to read his employer's silences the way a sailor reads weather, and was currently reading a storm advisory. Everyone presented in ascending order of visible anxiety. Then Zara stood up. She was wearing high-waisted, wide-leg black trousers with a crease sharp enough to cut something, a fitted deep emerald silk blouse that caught the conference room lighting in a way that felt unfair to everyone else in the room, and a black structured blazer with small gold hardware at the lapels. Her locks were pinned up in something architectural that she had spent considerable time on and would not apologize for. One ring, gold ear cuffs, pointed toe mules. The whole effect was of someone who had prepared for this on every possible level. She clicked to her first slide. In large, confident font, it read, Q3 projections, or how JW Capital left significant revenue uncollected, and I found it. The room went very quiet. Jae-won's gaze moved to the slide, then to her. He said nothing. "I know," she said pleasantly. "Strong title. I'm standing behind it." Then she presented 47 minutes of the most precise, most thoroughly uncomfortable strategic analysis the Global Partnerships Division had encountered in recent institutional memory. She had found 4 partnership opportunities that had been missed, documented the exact structural reasons they had been missed, process gaps, she specified carefully, not people failures, projected the revenue implications using 2 separate modeling methodologies, and ended with a priority framework that was, she would privately admit, a little bit of a flourish. But she had earned it. At minute 29, one of the senior directors opened his laptop and began typing. At minute 41, Shin Jae-won leaned forward by approximately 1 centimeter, which Park Dong-hyun, registering it in his peripheral vision, later described to nobody. Because he never described anything, but internally categorized as the equivalent of a standing ovation. She finished. The room held the particular quiet of people recalibrating. "Questions," she offered. One of the directors raised his hand. The timeline on the third opportunity, he said, seemed aggressive. She said it was aggressive, and then clicked to the appendix slide she had prepared specifically for that objection, because she had seen it coming from the structure of his earlier questions, and walked him through the reasoning with the patience of someone who had already won the argument and was choosing to be gracious about delivery. Jae-won hadn't moved. When people began gathering their things and the room started exhaling, she was cycling through her slides to close the file when she heard him say, from the head of the table, "Slide 9. Everyone went still again. The structural gap analysis, he said. You benchmarked it against the 2018 consolidation period. Yes. Why not 2022? Because 2022 was a post-pandemic recovery anomaly. Using it as a benchmark would have compressed the gap and made the problem look smaller than it actually is. I was after an accurate picture, not a reassuring one. Something moved through his expression. Not a smile. Not quite, but the pressure that builds before one. The title, he said. Yes. It was presumptuous. It was accurate. A pause. Both can be simultaneously true, he said. And then his eyes dropped to the footer of slide 9, where Zara had embedded. Something in a font so small it required actual intention to find. He looked closer. She watched it happen in real time, the exact moment he read it. The corner of his mouth moved, his shoulders shifted almost imperceptibly. He pressed his lips together. He lost. A laugh came out of Shin Jae-won like it had escaped through a gap he didn't know was there. Low, genuine, short, but real. An actual laugh. The conference room experienced it the way you experience a minor tremor. A small thing in physical scale, enormous in what it meant. The footer of slide 9 read, in the smallest possible font. Yes, I found the Slayer. No, I have no regrets. ZM. He recovered in approximately 3 seconds. The room, which had been holding its breath, began to breathe again. Zara closed her laptop with the composure of a professional who had absolutely planned this exact outcome. Thank you for your time, Mr. Shin. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and left. Park Dong-hyun, passing her on the way out, gave her a look that contained an entire biography. It became the story that circulated quietly in the margins of JW Capital Group's very controlled information ecosystem. Not the full story. Not the lounge. Not the espresso. Not the slide footer. Just the general fact that Zara Mensah, 7 weeks in, had somehow made the CEO laugh in a board meeting, which was either extremely brave or extremely lucky, and the people who knew her best understood that it had been neither. It had been entirely intentional. What built between them after that was something neither of them would have known to name at the time, because it didn't announce itself. It accumulated, the way trust accumulates, the way comfort accumulates, slowly and without ceremony, through the repeated experience of being in the same space with someone and finding that the space is better for it. The morning lounge. 7:30 to 8:15, every weekday espresso and whatever Seoul looked like on that particular morning. The city changed more than you'd expect, seen from that height. Winter fog settled low over the Han River in ways that made the city look like something from a different era. Sharp winter light came in gold and aggressive on clear days. Rain moved through in curtains that blurred the skyline into something impressionistic. They talked. Not always, but increasingly. He asked questions in the specific, considered way he did everything. Never generic, never performative. She answered honestly, which she did with everyone, but which with him felt like it mattered differently. She found things out about him the way you find things out about someone you are actually paying attention to, not through interrogation, but through accumulation. Small disclosures that happened sideways, offered without fanfare, often with the slightly careful quality of someone who was not entirely accustomed to the experience of telling someone something true about themselves. He had wanted to study composition at university. He had gone to INSEAD. He watched American action films from the 90s in his private screening room on evenings when the specific weight of being Shin Jae-won reached a certain altitude. Films with plots that required nothing of him and soundtracks that asked nothing but to be loud. He could cook, genuinely cook, not the performance of cooking but the actual thing, the kind that required understanding what heat and fat and time were doing to each other at a chemical level. He had taught himself from cookbooks in his late 20s when international travel had introduced him to the idea that food made with real attention was one of the only things that couldn't be anything other than honest. He had not told anyone any of this before. She found out about the cooking when he brought espresso to the lounge already made one morning, and it was so precisely calibrated that she'd looked at the cup and said, "You measured the ratio." Ratios are not arbitrary. Mr. Shin, you like to cook. I know how to cook. Those are not the same statement. He had looked at his own coffee. She had smiled at hers. The morning she asked about the dancing was week 11. The kind of Seoul winter morning that came in stripped down and clear. The sky almost aggressive in its blueness. The cold clean and absolute. She had been at the window. He had been at the table. How long? She asked. He looked up. He always understood what she meant, which had stopped surprising her somewhere around week 8. 11 years, he said. She turned from the window. You have been dancing for 11 years, and no one knows. My family would view it as unsuitable. Your family is incorrect. She said it flatly, without heat, which somehow made it land harder than if she had been angry. He met her eyes. The level steadiness of someone who agreed, but had not yet said so. What styles? She asked. A pause. The small kind, the kind that meant he was deciding. I started with contemporary. Incorporated other elements over the years. What you walked in on was footwork. Where do you practice? There's a space in my apartment. She nodded, her espresso warm in both hands. Watching him with the same quality of attention she gave things she cared about. Have you ever performed? In front of people? No. Do you want to? The longest pause yet. The kind with actual weight in it. The kind that sat in the room and changed the air. Yes, he said, and then quieter. I've wanted to since I was 23. Zara set her espresso down on the windowsill. She turned fully to face him. He had the look of someone who had handed over something fragile and was now waiting to see. What was done with it? Okay, she said. He repeated the word carefully. Okay. I'm not telling you to book a stadium tomorrow. I'm saying. She chose her words with the deliberateness she used when something was real. You are sitting 39 floors above the city in a building that carries your name, and you have spent 11 years keeping the most honest thing about yourself in a locked room because your family would find it inconvenient. She tilted her head. Jae-won. It was the first time she had used his given name. Not Mr. Shin. Jae-won. He went very still. You deserve to perform, she said. Just that. No soundtrack. No manufactured gravity. Just her and the winter light, and a truth that had apparently needed to be said out loud by someone who didn't require anything from him in return. He looked at the table, then at her. You are very direct, he said. I'm from Atlanta, she said, picking up her espresso. It's geographic. We can't help it. And for the second time, the second real, full, unauthorized time, Shin Jae-won laughed. She filed it away with the first one. She was starting a collection. What happened next was her idea, and she will own that part. The rest of it, the chaos, the commentary, the 3 separate entertainment news cycles, and the particular expression on Director Kwan's face when he saw the video. She is not taking credit for any of that. But the idea, yes. That was hers. It started on a Tuesday morning in February. She arrived at the lounge at her usual time to find him already there and already mid-sentence, which meant something had happened. He looked up before she'd even gotten to the machine. There's a showcase, he said without preamble. Independent, contemporary and urban performance. Runs the second weekend of April. She started making her espresso. Waited. My chief of staff found it. He paused. I didn't ask him to. Dong Hyun, she said, is a genius and we should pay him more. He's compensated extremely well. Emotionally, I meant. She sat down across from him, which was what they did now, the window and table arrangement long since replaced by the table and table arrangement of 2 people who had stopped needing a specific structure to be comfortable with each other. Tell me about it. He told her. Mid-sized venue in Itaewon. Curated application process. Contemporary and urban styles, broad interpretation. Audience vote at the end for a featured performance acknowledgement. You're applying, she said. He set his phone down. I haven't made a decision. You made a decision. You told me about it before 8 in the morning on a Tuesday, which means you were thinking about it last night. She studied him over her cup. What's the actual block? He was quiet in the real way, not the considering way. I am not anonymous, he said. The word anonymous sat in his sentence like something he had wanted his whole life and never had. Whatever I do is a story. If I apply, if I get in, if I perform. It will be a headline, she said. Yes. Shin Jae-won, Arts Showcase, solo performance. That is absolutely a headline. My family has had decades to shape what you do and how you do it. She said it simply. This is one evening of you doing the thing that is actually yours. She paused. Apply. Worst case, you don't get in, and we skip the harder conversation. Best case. Best case, it becomes exactly the headline I just described. Best case, she corrected. You find out what it feels like to do it in front of people who are there specifically because they appreciate it. Best case, you finally know what it feels like on the other side of it. She held his eyes. Don't you want to know what it feels like? The February morning light came in soft and gray through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Seoul, below, was already running. Yes, he said. Then apply. He picked up his phone. She drank her espresso. 3 weeks later, a Thursday afternoon, a forwarded email landed in her inbox. The acceptance notification from the showcase committee. No message attached. Just the email. She read it, put her phone face down, stared at the ceiling of her office for a full 20 seconds, then replied, I told you. His response came back in 90 seconds. You tell me many things. Hers, and I am correct every time. It's almost a problem. His, it is in fact a problem. Hers, and yet. A pause. Then, and yet. The preparation happened in the evenings. Not every evening. He was still running a company with his name on the side of the building, and his schedule remained what it had always been, an architectural achievement. But 3, sometimes 4 evenings a week, she would take the subway to his building in Yongsan, which had a lobby that felt like a very good hotel, and a front desk attendant who had learned her name by her second visit and greeted her warmly every time. The practice space on the upper level of his apartment was extraordinary, and she said, so the first time she saw it, without any performance of being impressed. Sprung floors, full mirrors on 2 walls, a sound system that made music feel like a physical presence. In the room, and in the center of it, Shin Jae-won, who was in this room a different person and entirely himself at the same time. She watched him work and understood immediately why this had stayed private. Not because it was merely good, though it was good, it was technically exceptional, and there was something underneath the technique that was feeling, actual unguarded feeling, expressed through movement in a way that he never expressed it in language. She understood why he'd kept it, because it was his. The one thing that existed entirely outside the architecture of who he was supposed to be. She wasn't a choreographer. She wasn't a dancer. She had famously and enthusiastically no rhythm, a fact she disclosed to him during their second practice session without embarrassment. What she was a person who paid close attention and told the truth, which, it turned out, was exactly what the situation required. The second section, she said one evening, sitting cross-legged against the mirrored wall in her off-duty uniform of wide-leg gray sweats, a cropped vintage Atlanta Hawks crew neck she'd had since her junior year at Georgetown and was not willing to retire, and white socks. Her locks were loose. She had snacks. She was fully comfortable. You're stopping yourself. He stopped, looked at her in the mirror. I'm not. You are. Your body is working toward a movement, and you're editing it right before it completes. Every time. She stood up, crossed to him, and demonstrated badly, energetically, the truncated motion she'd been watching on a loop. You do this, she mimicked the abbreviated version. When what you were about to do before you pulled back would have been. She made a gesture that conveyed something significant. The whole thing. That would have been the whole thing. He watched her enthusiastic, terrible recreation of his choreography with the expression she had come to love, the one where he was actively losing a battle against reacting. Run it again, she said. And this time don't edit. He ran it again. She watched the moment it happened. The moment he let the movement be what it wanted to be instead of what he had decided it should be. And the sequence transformed, became something that moved through her chest like a current. That, she said. That right there. That's the thing. He was breathing a little harder, looking at himself in the mirror with an expression she was starting to recognize. The expression of someone encountering themselves. Honestly, he turned from the mirror and looked at her. Something in his face was open in the way it only ever got in this room, or in the early morning lounge with Seoul below them, or on a Saturday in a market somewhere with no titles attached to either of them. I don't know how to do this, he said. In front of people. Yes, you do. You do it in front of me. You're different. The dancing is the same. She sat back down, retrieved her snacks. You just have to be actually inside it. Not managing it, not watching yourself do it. Inside it. She offered him a chip. He took it, which still quietly delighted her. Shin Jae-won in practice sweats eating a chip from her bag. The world contained multitudes. Stop performing the dancing, she said. Just dance. He ate the chip. You make it sound uncomplicated. It is uncomplicated. It's just not easy. Those are different things. She looked up at him. Big difference. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that had been building for months. The way things build when no single moment accounts for the whole accumulation, but one day you look and the accumulation is simply there. He didn't say anything. He went back to the center of the floor. He ran the section again. He didn't edit once. 2 weeks before the showcase, his mother called. Zara wasn't there for the call. She heard about it that evening from the quality of the room when she arrived. A particular silence, the kind that has weather systems in it. "Your family found out," she said. It wasn't a question. "My mother." He was standing at the practice room window, still in his work jacket. He hadn't changed. That told her something. She has connections on the showcase committee. Someone mentioned the application. What did she say? A pause. He measured it before answering, the way he measured everything. That it was inappropriate. That it would generate confusion about the company's positioning. That a man in my position, he stopped. Restarted. That there are things men in my position simply don't do. Zara set her bag down slowly. What did you say? He turned from the window. I told her I would consider her concerns. She kept her face neutral. And will you? The longest pause of their entire acquaintance. She let it sit. Let it occupy the room. No, he said. Something warm moved through her. Okay. She crossed the room. Stood in front of him, looking up at him with the same directness that had negotiated an espresso access agreement at 7:48 in the morning and had not failed her once since. She is your mother, and she has spent decades deciding what you should want. Of course she'll make this difficult. That's a real thing, and I'm not dismissing it. She held his gaze. But you are a grown man running an organization with your name on the exterior, and what she thinks you should want and what you actually want are allowed to be two separate things. They have always been allowed to be two separate things. He looked at her for a long moment. You always say exactly what you think, he said. Yes. He paused. It's one of the things, he stopped again. She waited. The city below. The warm room. Thank you, he said quietly. Zara. The way he said her name in these spaces, not Ms. Mensah, not the professional distance of the building and the floors and the titles, but Zara, just her name, just the thing she actually was, did something she had been carefully not examining too closely for the better part of 2 months. The drawer where she filed those things was getting full. Change, she said. We have a section to finish. He changed. They finished the section. She did not open the drawer. Not yet. The night of the showcase, Zara wore the vintage brown leather bomber she'd found at a Saturday market in Hongdae. The one he had told her, with characteristic understatement, was good, over a fitted black midi dress that moved when she walked, and black ankle boots with a low stacked heel. Gold-layered chains. Her locks down and loose around her shoulders, 2 small gold pins at the crown. She looked like someone attending something that mattered, because she was. Jae-won had asked her, with the specific neutrality of someone asking a deeply uncasual question in a casual register, whether she would be there. She had said, I will be somewhere in the first 3 rows being your most enthusiastic and entirely embarrassing supporter. He had said, I don't require a supporter. She had said, too late. He had said nothing, but something in his posture had settled, and that was its own complete answer. She arrived at the venue in Itaewon, a renovated performance space with exposed beams and warm lighting and the particular acoustic quality of a room that had been designed to hold sound rather than just contain it, and found her seat in the 3rd row. She had reconsidered front row at the last minute. Front row felt like it would read as pressure. 3rd row felt like presence. She wanted to be where he could feel her there without needing to perform for her. The showcase ran for 2 hours before his slot. She watched all of it, genuinely, the way she watched everything that earned it. A contemporary quartet who moved with a weight and precision that made the air in the room feel rearranged. A spoken word artist who did something with silence that made the audience forget to breathe. A b-boy unit who were technically overwhelming and knew it, and leaned into that knowledge with such playful confidence that the audience laughed from sheer delight. Real talent in a room full of people who were there because they loved this. She appreciated being in the right place. And then the host said the name. Shin Jae-won. The room shifted in the way rooms shift when a name carries weight. A collective recalibration, a current of recognition moving through the audience before he'd even walked out. A murmur of people looking at each other to confirm they had heard. Correctly. Then he walked out. All black. Fitted black trousers, a black long sleeve with a subtle texture, clean black sneakers she recognized from an afternoon in Insadong where he had picked them up from an independent designer and described them as functional, which had been the most understated endorsement she'd ever witnessed. He had done something slightly different with his hair, a small departure from his usual precision, not undone, just less managed, and the effect was of a person who had decided, for this one evening, to be present rather than composed. The murmur in the audience elevated to a buzz. He stood in the center of the stage. Still. She knew that stillness. She had watched it in the practice room for 2 months. The moment before he started, when he was going inward, finding the thing, locating the permission. She had told him, stop performing the dancing. Just dance. She had told him, be inside it, not managing it. She had told him this standing in a practice room in sweatpants eating chips from her bag, which was not exactly the delivery method she would have chosen, but it was what had happened, and apparently it had landed. The music started. What happened over the next 4 minutes and 22 seconds, Zara would spend a long time trying to find the right words for, and she would consistently come up slightly short, because the experience of watching someone be entirely themselves for the first time in front of other people is not something language was built to hold. Completely. He danced. Not performed. Not managed. Danced. The footwork she had stumbled into on a random Wednesday morning, now fully contextualized in a piece that moved through something that felt like arguing, then like grieving, then like deciding, then like release. The section she had watched him unedited. The part of the sequence where he had always pulled back right before it completed. Now doing precisely what it had always wanted to do, and the completion of that movement was so much more than what the abbreviated version had been that the contrast was its own kind of revelation. The groove through his shoulders. The weight settling low and real in his stance. And then, somewhere past the 2-minute mark, the moment she had been watching for, the moment she could identify from weeks of watching him practice. The moment he stopped managing it. The moment he was simply in it. The moment Shin Jae-won disappeared, and whoever he was underneath that, the person who had been, practicing alone for 11 years in a room with sprung floors and full-length mirrors, that person arrived. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The audience was absolutely silent. Not the silence of confusion or reserve. The silence of people who had been taken somewhere and were grateful for it. At 4 minutes and 22 seconds, the music stopped. He stopped. Stillness again. And then the room came apart. Not polite applause. Not even impressed applause. The involuntary kind, the kind that happens before the brain has finished its analysis. The kind that means something real has occurred and the body knows before the mind has caught up. People were on their feet. The b-boy unit from earlier was up, the way artists get up when they've recognized something in another artist that they respect. The contemporary quartet was gesturing to each other with the animation of people sharing a single experience of something significant. Zara was on her feet, clapping in a way her mother would have described as too much for a formal venue, and she did not moderate it by even a fraction. He stood on the stage, and for once, for the first time in all the months she had known him, she could see him receiving something. Not deflecting it with composure. Not managing it from behind the glass of his public face. Actually receiving it, letting it land. Letting it be real. His eyes found her in the 3rd row. She was grinning so hard her face hurt. He looked at her. The look he gave her was not the CEO look, not the measured assessment look, not the careful neutral look. It was something she had only ever seen in the practice room and the early morning lounge and the Saturday markets. Open in the way that belonged only to the spaces outside the performance of who he was supposed to be. He didn't look away. The featured performance acknowledgement was announced, and the audience vote was not close. He held the award, a handcrafted ceramic piece, clearly made by an actual person with actual care, and said into the microphone. In the measured way he said everything except that this time there was something living underneath the measure, something human that had not been allowed out in public before. I've wanted to do this for a long time. Thank you for letting me. That was all. It was entirely sufficient. The video was online before he had finished accepting congratulations from the other performers. Someone in the audience had recorded the full performance and posted it, and the response moved through the internet with the speed of something people recognized as real before they could explain why. The comments across platforms and languages converged on the same astonished observation. I didn't know. How did I not know this? It was not the response his mother had anticipated. His mother called the next morning. Zara was not present for that call either, but she heard about it over coffee at his apartment, which was what they did on Sunday mornings now, actual coffee at his kitchen table, the city below slower and lighter than its weekday version. She said, he reported with the precise recall he applied to everything, that the response was not what she had anticipated, and that the coverage had been largely favorable. Zara wrapped her hands around her mug. That's as close to I was wrong as you're going to get from her. Yes, I'll take it. She looked at him across the table. How do you feel? He was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at Sunday morning Seoul doing what it always did, enormous and patient, not waiting for anyone. Like something has been released, he said. He paused. Like I gave myself permission for something, and now I don't know how I did without it for so long. She nodded. You gave me that, he said. You gave yourself that, she said. I told you to stop stopping. That's different. He looked at her. Not the way he looked at presentations or proposals, or the things in his life that required assessment. The way he had been looking at her, increasingly, for the past month or two, which was the way a person looks at something they have decided, even if they have not yet said so. Zara. Jae-won. They sat in the Sunday morning quiet. The ceramic award on the kitchen shelf behind him. The Slayer espresso machine on the counter, for which she had negotiated formal standing access to his apartment's kitchen on the same terms as the corporate one. In and out, leave it clean. He had agreed with the same expression he'd had the first time. The look of a man encountering a variable he had not planned for. He put his coffee down. She noticed his hands, the stillness of them, the stillness of someone who had decided something and was about to say it. I would like, he started, and stopped, then started again in the careful way he said real things. For this, a slight gesture between them, the two of them, the table, the Sunday morning, the 11 months of espresso and honesty and Saturday markets and practice rooms, to have a name. Her heart did something she had no professional language for. This already has a name, she said. The name I mean, he said, is not friendship. She looked at him. The light came through his kitchen windows and sat on everything the way morning light does when it has decided to be gentle about things. No, she said. It's not. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held it. Not a dramatic gesture. Not something you would build a soundtrack around. Just two people at a table on a Sunday morning in Seoul, holding hands for the first time, which was both a small thing and the thing that everything had been quietly accumulating toward. Outside, Seoul did what it always did. Enormous, moving, indifferent, beautiful, not waiting for anyone. But in his kitchen, with the cold coffee and the ceramic award and the city laid out below them through the glass, time had the decency to slow down just enough. I haven't done this before, he said. Not an apology. Not a disclaimer. A fact offered honestly. Which part? She asked. Any of it. He looked at her with the openness that had been building for months and was now simply fully present. No room containing it anymore. Wanting something and not stopping myself. She smiled at him. The real one. The room-rearranging one. The one she had been. Giving him since the morning she walked in on a dancing CEO and made the most professionally questionable decision of her career. Good thing, she said, that I told you to stop stopping. He looked at her like she was the word he had been looking for. Good thing, he agreed. And there, in the quiet of a Sunday morning in Seoul, with the city glittering below and the award on the shelf and 11 years of kept secrets finally given permission to breathe, Shin Jae-won, who had been taught from birth to want only what was approved, wanted this. And this time, he didn't stop. Besties, here's what this story is really about. Jae-won had the building, the title, the net worth, the Forbes cover. He had everything a person is supposed to accumulate in a life built correctly. And none of it gave him the one thing that Zara gave him, which wasn't love, not first. It was witness. Someone who saw him, the real him, dancing alone in a locked room on a Wednesday morning. And instead of looking away, instead of pretending, instead of treating what she saw as dangerous, looked directly at it and said, I see you. And I'm not flinching. We live in a world that rewards the constructed version of people, the polished performance, the title before the name. We learn early that the real things, the things we do alone, the things we love without an audience, the things that belong only to us, are better kept private because private means safe. But kept too long, private becomes a kind of slow disappearing. Zara didn't fix Shin Jae-won. She just refused to pretend she hadn't seen him. She refused to let him pretend either. She walked in, saw the real thing, and held it with the kind of honesty that doesn't ask anything from the person except to stop hiding. Sometimes that is all it takes. One person who sees the thing you've been keeping in a locked room and says, that is the best thing about you. And you have been keeping it from everyone for too long. Stop stopping yourself. Leave a comment and tell me which moment hit different for you. And I will see you in the next story because we are just getting started. I love you all.
I'm glad you made it to this point. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and be part of the family. Let's go!